Kelton cringed hopelessly into a shallow crevice of rock, his shield raised in a futile warding gesture. The ground shook as the red dragon padded closer, its eyes all too intelligent and all too cruel.
Your armor should steam you to a perfect doneness, I think,
it said, its voice deceptively quiet. Kelton threw one last wild glance around this underdark cavern, willing himself to remember his demise. You know, just in case he came back as a ghost or something. He saw the dragon inhale then, and he clenched his teeth, squeezed his eyes shut, and held the shield a little further from his body. Then, a new voice suddenly spoke from somewhere above him.
Xanthus, this is not your hunting ground. Why are you here?
The voice was crystalline, and it vibrated in Kelton's ears like it would pull his entire body apart. He peeked from behind his shield. The red dragon had halted and was looking at something far above him. The breath it had intended to unleash was now just wisps of black smoke.
I was just pursuing this morsel, and I guess I lost track of my surroundings. If it please you, lady, I will take this vermin with me as I leave your premises.
Kelton risked stepping out a bit further to crane his neck and look up to see what had thrown the red off his game. He gasped in sheer amazement at the twin pools of violet light looking down at him. A dragon like nothing he had ever seen or heard of stared down with detached curiosity, its purple scales catching the bits of light emanating from the red dragon and throwing it all about like vibrant crystal shards. To Kelton's eyes, it appeared as if its horns were floating above its head. This was strange magic indeed. The mighty dragon turned its eyes back to the red.
A generous offer.
There was a sudden whoosh as it spread its wings and soared into the cavern, circling quickly and landing beside the red dragon, which was dwarfed by its regal presence. The amethyst eyes turned back to Kelton as its neck stretched down and its head drew closer and closer. Kelton thought he saw the detachment in those eyes give way to curiosity as it studied his shield.
This is new. I do not know the emblem. Where are you from, little one?
Kelton was clever, well, for a fighter anyway, and he liked throwing the dice. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. I cannot answer that question while this other lesser dragon is eavesdropping. I would be happy to share all sorts of knowledge with you if he is dismissed. Xanthus looked ready to incinerate him, and the purple dragon's eyes gave away nothing now. The silence stretched, and Kelton's life hung by a thread.
And thus concludes the Teachers in the Dungeon story time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teachers in the Dungeon. What a start to the show. I'm Tom Gross.
I am Dan Ream, looking around for the familiar that's been spying on me. We still haven't quite determined who's sending it, but it comes with startling regularity.
Indeed. Indeed it does. Well done. Well done. I was captivated. Took me a second to bring myself back together after that. You know, it just makes me, I'd be curious to think what everyone else thinks about this, but this is just one more step or one more clue that maybe there's a book in the future. No pressure, but
I can put a few paragraphs together and then it kind of falls apart.
Well, it all starts with one step. You know, the journey begins with one step. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. If you are a first-time guest in the dungeon here, thank you so much for joining us. You chose a good one to begin with. If you have joined us for many times here in the dungeon, thank you so much for coming back for the good times and the fun. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Teachers in the Dungeon. We're on X at Dungeon Teachers, YouTube, Teachers in the Dungeon, and did I miss something? I feel like I missed something.
Instagram and all those.
Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Yeah, we have a website too. Gmail is teachersindthedungeon@gmail.com. Lots of ways.
One way or the other, we got them all, I think.
That's right. You can find us one way or another. Well, today we return to our year-long series where we are alternating back and forth between shows where we will highlight a dungeon. I'm trying to get an order there. It took me a second. Brain power here on a Sunday morning. We're highlighting dungeons, one special dungeon each month of the year, and dragons, one special dragon. And today is probably figured it out from the story, but dragons.
Yes. So we're delving back into Fizban's treasury, and this time we're pulling out a gem to study, the mighty Amethyst Dragon. Fitting for February, it is the birthstone. The dragons are a little known compared to the chromatics and metallics, but one bit of wisdom has drifted down through the multiverse.
Oh.
So here's a quote. To meet an amethyst dragon is to become its puppet.
Great. That's exactly what I want. You know what they are. Your story really illustrated it well, though, that when an amethyst dragon shows up, I mean, they are, as Fizban says in his book, the mightiest of the gem dragons.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I found cool that I know you'll mention is that they are, of course, I would be interested in this being a Star Wars fan, but they are pretty strong with the, quote, Force.
Oh, that's a good
They
way to
have
put it.
psionic ability with telekinesis. Their breath weapon is a Force blast, which I'm sure you'll go into a little bit more. But I also love the idea that they are very interested in the multiverse.
Yes.
And exploring beyond the material plane, which, I don't know, I mean, maybe a lot of dragons do that, but there seems to be a special interest with gem dragons. So with all of my observation, that I'm done for the day. Dan did the research here. So Dan, get us started. I think you're starting with the lore of the Amethyst Dragon.
And by lore, just sort of general description and tendencies and proclivities and all that sort of thing. So a couple of things that pop out. They are seen as very wise and regal, but also very aloof and isolated and dispassionate. So all the interest that you mentioned that they show in learning things, it's all about the things and not about the creatures.
Okay.
They're not like all the gem dragons. They are neutral, aligned, so they're not evil. They're not looking to harm or necessarily steal or do anything like that. But neither are they at all interested in helping someone just for the sake of helping or doing a good deed or anything. That it wouldn't even occur to them. They don't think that way. And so they're inscrutable is maybe a good word to describe.
So in your story, then, he wasn't necessarily showing up to save the man. He was showing the fighter. He was showing up to learn, which you had in the story. But he wanted information. He wanted to know knowledge.
Actually, there is another reason that we'll get to here in a bit.
Ooh, okay, awesome.
So
the story comes back.
Yes, the only way this fighter was going to stay alive is if he had information that was intriguing enough to keep him alive.
Okay.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be, I hate you, I'm going to destroy you. It's, well, you're not really worth my time.
Right. Okay.
So, as you said, they do have psionic abilities. We've already covered that. We'll come back, like you said, and look a little more detail when we get to the stats. They are considered. It's interesting. Although they are, I guess it's because they're dispassionate. They're the most diplomatic of dragons.
Yes.
They will often intervene to stop conflict. So that to me is I have to figure out how to integrate that. That doesn't, like, you would think they wouldn't care, but I suppose conflict would mean disorder and perhaps loss of something important.
That's what I was thinking is it's it's like the amethysts have the most intense case of FOMO. They don't want something bad to happen to destroy. No, don't wait. What do you know and what do you know? Okay, now I don't know. After that, I don't know if they would just allow the fight to happen once they extract the information from the two parties. But that's, I would imagine that is why they like to be the diplomat, because of the loss of knowledge.
And they are the most powerful gem dragons, so they do line up against gold and red, power-wise. But I think of those three, are the least likely to fight. They will always try to diffuse a situation. But it does go on to say, the lore, if it comes to fighting, you're probably done, because it will not retreat or hide or ambush. This is considered very dishonorable. Okay. So they're going to come at you until it's done, once they've decided
I came across descriptions of that numerous times, that the fighting is the last choice, but not because they're not capable. They are quite fierce fighters when it does come to it. And I didn't realize that they will fight to the end, is what I'm hearing.
They tend to, although I found another source that said if it's hopeless, if it's clear that they will lose, then they will retreat to preserve themselves. And I would guess it's because of their regard for their own knowledge. If I die, all this knowledge dies with me.
Right.
So I will retreat.
Okay.
So one other thing, just to kind of circle back to their curiosity, they love to research and study the multiverse, as you said. And to add to that just a bit, what I found is they're particularly intrigued by good versus evil, order versus chaos, except that, I mean, I think they study that, but they're a little impatient with it. Like it's a distraction.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why they don't really pick sides. They don't see good and evil as good and evil. It's just two bickering sides that get in the way of knowledge.
I see.
They said they are not emotionally involved in any of it, although intrusions from the far realms.
Yes.
They hate that.
Yes, and that is where the aberrations come into play.
They hate aberrations.
They absolutely do. And you know, I don't know, nothing that we have talked about with Amethyst Dragons yet say anything about nature or that kind of balance. Certainly, they like to have balance because balance it makes knowledge safe and secure. But like a druid is what I'm thinking. A neutral druid, they also would despise an aberration. So it makes sense to me that a neutral creature would. I mean, there's just nothing good about an aberration in most cases. There is one.
Did you find it?
I did find it. There is one that they are just happily intrigued with, and I think they like them because they battle other aberrations in general, and that would be. Do you want to say it? Or
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Because it's one of the most fun creatures in the D&D universe to say, and that would be the flumph. They like the flumphs, even though they're an aberration, but everything else, they have a pretty severe hatred for in that category, particularly mind flayers. Because a mind flayer, once again, would control you, limit knowledge, even destroy knowledge or collect it for its own evil purposes.
That would be very offensive to an amethyst dragon. Yes.
Yeah.
So that would make sense. It'd be the one thing that would sort of dislodge it from its dispassion and would make it jump forward. So one other thing just quickly about its appearance, as you would expect, it is, as you get to an adult or ancient dragon, its scales are very crystalline and look like amethysts. And the other thing about them that reflects their psionic abilities is that their horns are actually detached from their head, but they float above.
I was having a hard time picturing that.
I've seen some images.
Is it like a crown of horns, or
No,
it's the actual horns?
But there's just a gap.
And they just okay.
I did read somewhere that it struck me as like a cat's ears or something, or dog's ears, because it says you can tell their mood.
Oh, I did come across something like that. Yeah. What an enjoyable.
But I would guess that it is not. I guess that it doesn't follow the pattern of a dog's or cat's ears. Like you'd have to learn.
Right. What each, like the twists and turns of them. Yeah, the positions of them. Okay, what do we have next?
All right, so kind of blending into that, I found a little bit on their general behavior and their family life.
Okay.
So we've already talked about the fact they're aloof, they're not predisposed to like or dislike. They are mind readers, quite diplomatic. However, this is what makes them, I think, tricky for other creatures to deal with, is they are very manipulative. That they are always looking to co-opt others and either find out what they know or get them on their side for whatever it is they're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
And what they're trying to accomplish has nothing to do with necessarily benefits to living creatures, although there are some examples in some of the texts of them doing so. But again, the kicker is they are not malicious. I mean, you think manipulative and you immediately think evil.
Yeah.
But it isn't that. They have a goal, and to them it's the goal. So anybody that can be useful to that, they're going to bend until they are.
I'm trying to think. There's something coming to my mind about that kind of person. When you think about the person in a friend group, just I'm talking generally here, in a friend group who likes to know everything, likes to be the inside, might be the gossip, but not necessarily for bad reason. They just like to know everybody's business. That's kind of like the Amethyst Dragon. There's not any particular evil or wrongness to the knowledge of knowing everybody's business. It's just because that's their personality.
I think if that person is an introvert, I think it fits.
That's the Amethyst Dragon.
Yeah. Extrovert probably wouldn't fit because they're not chatty.
Yeah.
Did you find there are other dragons that they tend to not like?
Oh, I don't think I found that.
So
I just assumed the chromatic dragons were...
There are 2 metallic dragons they avoid. They don't have time for.
Oh.
Could you guess what either one might be?
I don't know why. It's probably because last week we talked about it, but the bronze dragon comes to mind, but I don't know if that... Yeah,
no, I think the bronze dragon would probably be... They would probably dismiss them as not very interesting, but they...
No,
so
who is it?
this one, there's one of these that I think is obvious once you hear it, and one I was like, really? So the obvious one is the copper dragon.
Okay.
Copper dragons are tricksters. They pull pranks.
Oh, okay, sure.
They, so that Amethyst would be like, what are you doing? You're wasting everybody's time. There's things to be learned.
So in other words, you're telling me they're no fun.
They're probably not much fun, no.
Yeah.
And I would have thought connected to that brass dragons would be the other one, but actually, according to the lore, it's the silver that they don't have time for.
What is it about the silver? I seem to, now that you say silver, I think I did come across that somewhere, but I don't remember why.
The only thing I can figure is that silvers are fascinated by humanoids just for their own sake, and they get very involved. What they're fascinated by is their relationships and their growth and their way they see the world, and likes to live among them. And for the amethyst, I think that would be very silly, because that's knowledge that's not purposeful to them.
Okay.
That's the only thing I can figure.
Yeah, I mean, as you were describing that, I was like, well, I think they would be interested in that, and like would have silver dragon friends to gather information of the humans and whatnot. But
it's not information they would care
that they
about.
would be they would have any interest in. Okay.
So there's 2 chromatics as well.
I mean, red dragon comes to mind.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
it would be a peer.
So
to
that's what turns back to the story at the beginning.
It's the red dragon.
Yeah.
I would also guess, I don't know that I have a reason for this, but I'm guessing the blue dragon would be the other one. No?
No.
Is it black?
Black would make sense, but this other one does make sense. The white.
Okay.
Whites are the dumbest. And I remember seeing somewhere that they are the most bestial of dragons.
Okay.
So
you know so much more about the dragons than I do.
But black would make sense. And when I thought about it, it's the chaotic one.
Because I was going to say they're chaotic. So.
Yes, the chaotic would just, again, not that amethysts necessarily hate chaos, but it gets in the way of knowledge. So,
Right. Destructive.
Yes.
It's destructive. Okay.
So that they actively, so the 2 metallics they just think are silly. They actively dislike the red and the white.
Okay.
Other odd little tidbits here and there that just I didn't know where else to fit in. They eat fish and gemstones.
Yes. So one thing I always find fascinating about dragons is not only do they have lair actions and special characteristics to the lair, but there's also regional. When it's an ancient dragon, there are regional effects. And this is that what they eat is a very regional effect. So anywhere, and you might, sorry if I'm taking away from, because you're going to talk about lair in a little bit, but within the region, I think is it 1 mile or is it like 6 miles? I don't remember now, but there's a radius where amongst any lake or water body, the fish life and fish creatures will reproduce twice the level as normal because that is what their food source is, are the fish. But then they will also eat the gems. And so, of course, on the edges of all lakes and rivers will be an unusually high amount of amethyst geodes and crystals and things like that. So what I think is neat is, as a DM, is, when your players are adventuring and they're just not really, they're paying attention but not thinking, and you start mentioning that you're finding these geodes and fish that might, or you come across a town that just is rich in fish trade and in gems.
I'll go ahead and drop this here anyway, because there is one other thing I thought was fascinating that as a DM you can do.
Okay.
Another sign that you're near an Amethyst Dragons lair is if you come into a town and all of the humanoids address you by name.
Because he knows.
He already knows.
Because he already knows who you are. Yeah. What is that? It's he has a special ability of, is it lores and
I forget.
It's a spell effect that he doesn't have to really cast.
It's basically just telepathy. He's going to know everything.
Legend and lore, I think is it. So he already knows. I didn't pick up on that one, but I picked up on the spell. I didn't pick up on like how that would impact the region. That's cool.
Those would be fun to really creep out the players, but make it turn in an unexpected direction, because that does sound like we're dead. But it probably wouldn't be the case. So it can also eat dirt if it has to.
Earth. Yes. I had a picture of like like one of those large cranes that scoops. I don't know. There's a name for it. That's what that's what he looks like when he's just like, famished. He can't find his favorite. He just reaches down and just takes a chomp out of the earth. Okay.
So they are good parents, and they live in nuclear families rather than in larger clans, which is what a lot of the other dragons do. Yeah,
they raise 2 or 3 wormlings at a time. But there's an interesting piece to that I imagine you'll get to, but okay, I'll say it, but they have a heavy belief that independence is a part of life. And so while they will care for these wormlings, they really kind of push them to go out on their own pretty quickly, or at least teach them those skills.
Yes. So early independence is very important to them. So it struck me that it could seem a bit callous to the outsider.
Right. Yeah. Those terrible parents. How dare they throw their kids out to the wolves?
So next up, kind of building on what we've already talked about, is the habitat. Where can you find them?
Okay, yeah.
And they are very rare on the material plane, but much more common on the plane of Earth, is what I found.
Okay.
They live in caves next to water with lots of tunnels and open spaces so that they can make the most of their telekinesis when necessary.
Okay.
They hoard knowledge and magic items involved with travel through planes. So an amethyst hoard it'll probably have some treasure, but it's going to be mostly magical items, particularly anything that allows you to, dimension door or plane shift or things of that nature.
Right.
We talked about the lair effects. Some of their lair actions are beguiling whisper. So anywhere you are in their lair, they can try to charm you.
Yeah.
They can create force cage. I like the one thing that I thought was the coolest is they have an ability in their lair to exist in 2 spaces at once.
That was, and you can attack both, but it only affects one.
Yes,
how I read it.
Or it can decide, so if you only see one of them,
Yeah.
one of those spaces, it just won't be there when you attack it. but then it will when it's its turn.
That's pretty cool. And to think they didn't like the trickery of the, what is it, a copper dragon?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That sounds pretty tricky to me.
So we already mentioned the other regional effects, which I do think are cool. Amethyst crystals everywhere and that sort of thing. So then moving on from that, just there, I'm not going to go through all the numbers, other statistics. There's some that may have popped out to you, but they are, again, equivalent in their abilities to the most powerful of the other types of dragons. They have the usual complement of attacks. And as you mentioned, their breath weapon is force. They call it a singularity breath.
Yeah, which I think is a cool name.
So I was like, okay, so it's like getting hit by a black hole. That would be. It did seem to me that they had more spell casting than the typical dragon.
I think their psionics bring a lot of that.
Yes. So they've got, most of these they can only do one a day, but there's a long list of them. Blink, Dispel Magic, Globe of Invulnerability, Plane Shift. On a bonus action, they can polymorph their self. They can do Psychic Step.
Yeah, so as a bonus action, they can be in front of you, then they can Psychic Step behind you. Mm-hmm. It's like a I don't know. There are other spells that have that same thing, but they can just do this anytime.
Yeah.
So in one battle,
they're just
they could attack you or force or singularity breath you, and then gone.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine fighting one of these things. It'd be so frustrating.
It would be. The only thing, I don't know if you found this. This was cool. They have the ability to generate an amethyst crystal in their mouth.
Yes.
And spit it up to 60 feet, and it explodes.
It explodes.
It's like a grenade.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
They are resistant or immune to force damage and force space spells. That's very rare among in D&D creatures.
Yeah.
Force is the one you can usually count on. So magic missile wouldn't do squat against them.
Nope.
They can communicate with any sentient creature. So
okay, so
creature
regardless of language,
if a creature has a consciousness of any kind,
it can communicate.
An amethyst dragon can communicate with them. Yes, which I thought was pretty cool. So they're a fascinating array of abilities that would be fun to play, but also very difficult for your players to counter. I think because it's very different from.
Yeah, I think you would be glad that they just really don't want to fight.
Right.
And parlay is
They do seem to have more defense, more protection than most dragons.
They do. Except for that. And I'm sorry, I can't get this out of my head. I'm sorry, folks, but that thing where they create the amethyst in their mouth and it's like hawking a loogie, man. They're just
gross. At least it's
so
solid.
if you hear him making that noise, you better move it.
You know to run.
Move it.
So these are, I'm gathering this is something that some authors created and they've since been pulled into canon by wizards, outside of this.
Yeah, I was looking at the references of the Forgotten Realms wiki on Amethyst Dragons. That's where most of my things came beyond Fizzbands.
There's not a lot beyond that. That's really the only place I found anything either.
Yeah, so they're in the Monstrous Manual of TSRs in 1993.
Oh.
And they show up in a book called That's Not in the Monster Manual in 1980.
You read the footnotes, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, that's where.
Good librarian. I was like, why bother? That's a different
you know
font.
what? I wanted to embrace the curiosities of the Amethyst Dragon and have knowledge. But the one that I wanted to bring up was there's a 1994 version of Volo's Guide to the Sword Coast written by Ed Greenwood. And so, why did I want to bring that up? You said something that made me you said someone wrote about them, and then that's how they sort of morphed into canon of this. And so I do wonder if it's either, and I'm trying to go back to the footnote on that 1980 source, either Ed Greenwood, because Ed Greenwood inked a lot of the Forgotten Realms, but I mean, he inked the world of
Right.
the Forgotten Realms, but as well as many of the novels. But here, Arthur Collins wrote the book. That's not in the monster manual. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's not it's not a book. I need to finish reading the source. It is from Dragon Magazine number 37. I'm telling you, that's where it came from. That's where it came
Okay.
from. Oh, I miss those Dragon magazines. Did you ever? Oh, you could.
I could, no.
Your mom wouldn't let you buy those.
No.
Heathen.
I don't think I was allowed. I don't think I was allowed within 5 miles of a comic store.
Anytime I went to the Fox Valley Mall, I went to the hobby store down next to the food court. If you remember in the 1980s and 70s, the food court was sunken down in the middle of the mall.
Got yourself an Orange Julius?
I'm not sure I know that reference.
Oh no! Oh,
What is
Tom.
that?
An Orange Julius? You didn't have an Orange Julius at your mall? I don't know quite how to. I think I only got one once because mall food is expensive, so we never had it. But
Yeah.
it was just a drink store, and it was
What?
orange flavored, but it tasted. I think I had it once, and if I remember, it was basically orange cream.
Okay.
So it was sort of like a smoothie, like they would blend up ice with orange juice and then this white powder that made it sort of creamy.
Creamy. Huh.
So it was good.
Gosh, we didn't grow up that far apart that I would think the Fox Valley Mall, because
Well, and,
I mean,
and
we're
this,
within 100 miles of each other when we grew up.
And during this time of my life, I lived in Rockford or near Rockford. So
So yeah, just,
the Cherryvale Mall.
weird. I never got Orange Julius is what
Yes.
it's called. Oh, okay. But no, so the hobby store was down
Well,
there by the food
Mr.
court.
Amethyst Dragon, you've now incorporated a new piece of knowledge
That's
into your.
right. Now I can kill you.
I have no value anymore.
I have extracted all the knowledge I need about Orange Julius. But no, so we would go down to the food court down there, and they had all the Dragon magazines, and just all of them. I mean, the new releases,
Right.
And I mean, they were a little expensive for a kid, but I picked up several, usually based on the cover. If it had a cool cover, you better believe I was grabbing the Dragon magazine, because it's hard. It was either the Dragon magazine or the Crystal Dice that had just come out in 19 whatever, and so you're like, oh man, content or dice, content or dice. What do I do? So here's my guess, and I could probably we'll do a little bit further investigation on this, but I'm going to guess Arthur Collins that's not in the monster manual, probably, if not developed the Amethyst Dragon. I'm going to bet he developed it.
Well, there's another possibility, but I was a bad historian and did not put down the year this book came out, so I'll save that for a bit, and maybe you know. So do you want to introduce probably the most famous Amethyst Dragon?
Oh, sure. This is cool. His name is Eldenzer. Now, he does have a little sidebar in Fizzbands. I did a little bit further research just because he sounded really cool. So from what I gathered, and correct me if I'm mistaking some of this information, Eldenzer is kind of he's a Amethyst Dragon, but physically is not in the greatest health. His body is deteriorating. He is, I'm guessing, he's an ancient dragon. And so what he does is he goes to like a very remote, safe space, and then he will send his soul to a material item. And then usually a sword. He's called the Lurker, is his epithet. And it's because he will jump from material item to material item and just travel and observe from these material items. And he'll stay in that way for a long time, but he's doing two things. One, he's preserving his body because it is deteriorating. And second is through the travels of the individuals he's with, or the individuals that are carrying the item that his soul is in, he gets to observe and gain knowledge that way. So that's what I was able to glean. Those are the cool things that I liked about him, but I'm sure there's more.
Well, that's just details. That his doing that is known as a draconic shard.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I
And
forgot about that.
And the Fizbands expanded that a little bit, that lore a little bit, and made it seem like any ancient Amethyst Dragon, when its time has come, the psionic abilities have become so powerful that they just hold the soul or the spirit or whatever together, even without the body.
Okay.
So any ancient Amethyst Dragon, I guess, if it so chooses, can move in, can do this. And to me, it struck me as sort of, lich-like.
Very much so.
Almost, but not, not evil, just
and it can't really do anything while it's there other than just...
Well, it can manipulate, and it may still have goals to accomplish, and can use the people that are around that weapon.
Okay. So I missed that. And I was the question I had when I was reading about it was, do they know? Does whoever is carrying this sword, because he also, another epithet of his was something of the blade,
Yeah,
or
the worm.
The
worm who hides in blades.
The worm who hides in blades.
Doesn't quite roll off the tongue.
No, but it's very descriptive. I always wondered when I was reading that, do they know he's in there?
And that's a little bit more that I read said probably not.
And so they are being manipulated
because there are intelligent magical weapons.
Yeah.
So it can.
So he might be controlling a little bit.
Yes, I really need. Wouldn't it be great to go look at this fortress and uncover this secret and that sort of thing? So that can be a fun thing to play on with your characters, I think.
Yeah.
Your players. So I've got a couple other names. One I don't know much about, but the name is just so epic, pronunciation-wise. I had to look at this for a long time. Aleathilithos. And then I was like,
oh, yeah.
and then I was like, are there any other words in English that have two THs in them? And I didn't think about it long, but I couldn't think of it.
How did you say that? Aleathilithos?
Aleathilithos.
Nice.
The Thane. The Thane of Sardior, the Ruby Dragon. Of Sardior, the Ruby Dragon. So this sounds like I guess I shouldn't attribute this to them, but reading a little bit about the Thane of this Ruby, because the Ruby Dragon was dismantled in the distant past, but aspects of him live on in various gem dragons that attend in the temple or something. So it kind of reminded me of sort of bringing in sort of some Eastern religion concepts.
Yeah.
Different facets, which fits for gems.
Now I'm going to go look at the citations.
Okay.
Let's see where they come from. Okay, so one of the citations for that it comes from that's not in the Monster Manual. Dragon 37 is this one source, and the other source is, I love doing this stuff. Good thing I'm a librarian. It comes from the Legend of Sarador. That's his name,
Sardior.
Right? Sardior. And the Mind's Eye, Wizards of the Coast, archived from the original in 2020. This was retrieved in 2019. So I'm guessing that sounds like a book.
Could
I
be.
mean, obviously it's a book, but I mean, it sounds like a novel. I don't know anything about it, though.
There is one other named dragon that I thought was worth mentioning that came from a novel as well, and this is Nyandar.
Okay.
And this character, it's a dragon that assumed the role of a human sorceress. And I think everything we've talked about so far plays up the reasonableness and, although we've said Amethyst Dragons are very detached and everything, we've kind of talked about them like, they're good guys. This is not really a good guy dragon. Powerful, arrogant, impatient, dispassionate, was very interested in seeing if she could blend as an experiment, blend dragon and humankind. So she managed to find a way, as in her human form, to become pregnant and give birth as an experiment, but then sort of just had the experiment and said, okay, cool, I'm done. Shipped it off to an orphanage. So this child grew up not knowing anything other than that she had been abandoned, and this child's name was Chenowin. So this comes from a book from the Forgotten Realms called War in Tethyr, Tethyr. And so that I thought, okay, that gives from a good evil side of things, the darker shading of amethysts.
Right.
That because they're so detached, in a lot of way, human life or humanoid life probably doesn't have a lot of value to them for its own sake.
Okay.
So she thought, you get done with the experiment and you dump the contents of your beaker and move on. And that's kind of what she did with this individual.
Interesting.
So I thought that was kind of interesting. So, well, moving on, because we're rolling along here. So
we are. Yeah.
Try to end up kind of combined, and this is putting you on the spot because maybe you haven't had a chance to think about this. How would you use them in a campaign, do you think, or role play them? I've got some ideas, but I've had some time to think. So
the role play, I don't know, but in a campaign, I really like the idea, as we mentioned earlier, of you walk into this area. It would be kind of cool for them to be able to find, like when adventurers are in the village and they're in this village where everyone knows who they are, they've noted that there's unusual fish counts and this very heavy in gems. If they were to come across or be gifted by these people a sword and said, take this sword and travel the world with this sword and blah blah blah, and it is either a dragon or it is the dragon, Eldenser, and have that sort of go. And so then the manipulation of the dragon would lead the adventurers through some sort of a task of some sort or something like that. Shoot, I had another idea when we were talking. It's gone from me. Go ahead and share something, and I'll see if it'll come back to me.
Sure. I've kind of divided between lower level characters and upper level characters.
Yeah.
So for lower level characters, I think the most obvious use of an Amethyst Dragon is as a quest giver, which is kind of what you've said there, that they would be very busy with some sort of research, but they'd need this one thing. And they can't leave what they're doing, but since your group arrive into a local village and think, these might be the very adventurers to be able to retrieve this for me.
Yeah.
So given a quest, very upfront, do this and I'll give you this. And it's very transactional, but no attempt to trick or no bad surprises from them. I could see, or at the lower level, I could see where they would be, the goal is to meet the Amethyst Dragon, but obviously not trying to attack it or fight it or anything, but maybe try to get it to share some of its knowledge. And how do you convince something that, maybe there's a rare spell that you need or a rare magic or a potion to save this individual. And the amethyst is like, it's just one person. Why would I care? People die all the time.
Yeah.
And so you have to find a way to convince them. If you've got a party that really enjoys the role play, I think that would be a really fun.
That would be cool.
A very a not so usual big boss ending. Is you're not trying to kill him, you're trying to convince him.
Yeah.
And if you fail, you don't die. You don't get, you don't win. You don't get what you were trying to get.
Right.
I could see higher levels. I think I would play the Amethyst as a wild card, as a DM against higher level characters. They don't really love humanoids, although they are curious about them. An Amethyst Dragon, maybe you've got to convince an Amethyst Dragon to take a side in a conflict or help stop a conflict. Maybe that's what you would do. I think it would be really... I don't think I would ever use an Amethyst Dragon to actually attack a party. I'll quote myself here. Unless the party is a bunch of worthless murder hobos and the DM wants to teach them a sharp lesson.
Okay, yeah. I get you on that.
I could see myself if I ever have a group of students that is, they just kill stuff, then that might be what they come up against as an Amethyst Dragon who's not going to take their guff.
Yeah.
And, is not going to just attack them, so it won't be that obvious. But if they prod and push, then they're going to get hit with their force, the singularity breath,
right,
and the amethyst grenade, and all the rest of it.
All the good stuff. How far down in the dragons? So you got ancient, adult. What's below adult? Why
Ancient,
can't I
adult,
remember?
young, and wormling.
Okay, yeah. Do all of them have those? Do you know?
No, I think. Well, they probably all have the breath, but it scales.
Yeah, right. It's not quite as powerful.
Yeah,
but the
amethyst grenade, I think, probably is.
Okay. I always when I look at these, I always just look at the ancient because that's the coolest.
Right, me too.
Because they
me
have
too.
everything. They
Yes.
have everything, and so
Yes.
what does the everything have?
And to be honest, I mean, that's the nice thing about the game is if you really like that grenade, then just your Amethyst Dragon is young, but it can do it.
Yes.
It can go ahead and spit it. You just scale it down
Right.
a little bit. I would role play them probably as very detached, wise, bemused, maybe a little mocking,
Okay.
or you could do sort of the distracted, crazy scientist.
Right.
Type
Where they're more
thing.
interested in the knowledge of something than being social.
Yes,
And,
not foolish, not
Right.
not the scientist with the wild hair and the gun smoke on its face from an explosion.
Right.
I don't think Amethyst Dragons ever make mistakes.
So not a Doc Brown from
No. I'm trying to think what it would if there is a
Yeah.
character in pop culture that's inscrutable like that and very. I mean, characters should be a little bit afraid of them because you don't know what
Just-
they're thinking.
Yeah, just on the edge.
Yeah.
You don't know. Yeah. These are cool. I've never really looked into the gem dragons before. When Fizzbands came out, I remember them being in there and being okay. These are interesting, but you also have all of the ones that are in the monster manual that you don't really use as much, and so I'm always like reticent to go diving into another lore of dragons.
Yeah.
But this is cool. I really like the way the Amethyst Dragon works.
Let's say to metagame the whole D&D world, it's definitely a smart move on their part. That was a giant niche. You've got good dragons and evil dragons,
Right.
but neutral plays a huge part in D&D.
Yes.
You need neutral dragons too.
Yeah. Very cool. And they like flumphs.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe there's a role play there.
Oh, I think
With the
so.
flump.
That's anytime a quirk like that, that's fun to lean into.
Yeah. It's almost like they create the relationship with the flump. The party creates the relationship with the flump first, and then there's a connection. There's this mysterious connection that the flump keeps referencing in some way when they're communicating with it, and it drives the curiosity of the party.
This is a tangent that barely fits, but what better way than to just end with it?
Yeah.
In the Critical Role Legend of Vox Machina animated series,
Okay.
there's a story arc where they have to find a male sphinx, which in D&D are quite powerful monsters,
Okay.
and also very inscrutable and very much mind game type of a thing.
Okay.
So he says, I will, if you can wound me, I'll answer your questions. And so the barbarian and the druid and all those try, and they all fail, and they get knocked into this bottomless pit, just falling. And all that's left is the bard, the Randy Bard, the joke character.
Yeah.
And so he, it's kind of cool. He sings a song about a lost love, and you see a tear.
Oh man.
So then, to turn it back to the whole flump thing, he brings all of the others back, and they see the bard sitting next to him, telling him dirty jokes, and him just kind of chuckling and you're so crazy, and just clearly very fond of this little gnome that's just kind of a morally horrible person.
Yeah.
And I think that I could see an amethyst dragon with a flump near it and just
Just like buddying up with it.
laughing at
Yeah.
whatever it does. And
Oh my gosh. That's cool. I need to watch that sometime. I need to watch it.
Not with your kids, but yes.
Right. Yes, that I have looked at the graphic novels of it, and not something to watch with them. But there is something. Our group a month or two ago, I think it was Paul had texted us about a Amazon Prime series. Did you watch that?
I did, and
I can't remember what it's called.
So we brought up a thing we can't reference.
It's shoot. Oh man, well, you brought up it's
a
Vox Machina.
Well, it's a series on games.
Yeah,
and so only one episode was on
Dungeons and Dragons,
and it was just a
secret
final
level.
Yeah, a final boss battle. Basically, it just that's what it showed.
But I thought it was so cool,
and it did actually. It does reference dragons, so it does fit for what we're talking about today.
It does, yes.
Not an amethyst one, but
the monk is so cool in that.
Yeah.
Well, good. So we've covered last month. You covered, I forget now. Silver Dragons. And so now we've got the Amethyst Dragon, and we did the Sunless Citadel a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And so I guess next up then will be the next.
So in March,
yep,
you guys can kind of predict what you think, which gem we're going to talk about.
Okay. Yeah. And do we want to preview the next dungeon, or do you want me to wait?
Why don't we you said it has a connection, maybe just briefly.
It does have a connection to the Amethyst Dragon.
Okay.
And so let's just leave it there. Yep. See if anyone can figure out what famous dungeon has some type of an influence of an Amethyst Dragon. We'll go with that.
Cool.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on Teachers in the Dungeon. Reach out to us if you've got questions or stories of using an Amethyst Dragon at teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com. So for Dan Ream, I'm Tom Gross, and until next time, keep rolling those 20s.